Good morning to wherever you are in the world right now. Today we are going to be talking about the new Elden Ring Nightreign game that was announced at the Game Awards. Now, I personally did not watch the Game Awards. I have grown man activities to conduct, so I didn't watch it. But it was easily the biggest surprise of the night, just because Miyazaki has said on multiple accounts that after Shadow of the Erdtree, we're probably not going to be working on, Elden Ring as hard, and especially like a big DLC like Shadow of the Erdtree, then to make a new spin-off game. It was easily hugest moment of the night. From Software devs are not getting PTO. There is no way with all this shit they're doing. Now, yes, this video is very late. Yes, nobody probably even gives a fuck about hearing Nightreign reviews anymore, but this is my thoughts, and I don't care, okay? We'll move on to greener pastures later, so let's get into it. But first, how is Nightreign gonna play? So, Nightreign is going to be a survival co-op roguelike. Now, what do those three words even mean? I'll tell you. So, survival. The survival aspect in Nightreign is that you are going to spawn into an area, and you are going to survive for 3 days. 3 days, 3 nights, and at the very end, you'll fight a final boss. And in those 3 days and nights, you're becoming as strong as you humanly can, okay? So, that's going to be the survival aspect. Co-op. Co-op. Seamless co-op. You know those seamless co-op mods you have in, Elden Ring modded on the computers and shit? Finally, it's going to be in an actual game, because the worst thing in Elden Ring was that co-op. I can't fucking run everywhere with my boy and expect to have a good time playing this game. It's just not going to happen. So, they finally added seamless co-op up to 3 players, and yes, there will be no PvP. And then that last word, which is probably the, biggest one, is roguelike. Now, I didn't know what a roguelike was, but if you've played games like Dead Cells, you probably know what a roguelike is. So, a roguelike is basically a game in which, let's say you have to go through like 5 levels. Let's say you go through the 5 levels and you die at the 5th level. You'll restart all the way back to the 1st level, but the next 5 levels you go through are all randomized. They're all different, So, yeah, that's pretty much it. And after seeing the Nightreign trailer, I have my thoughts, but first I want to get into the positives, things I liked about it.
When you go into a fucking restaurant, they charge you $2.50 for a soda. On the way out, you should blow that place up.
Nightreign shows that From Software is experimenting with different mechanics, mounts, and boss design. As we see in the trailer, there's an eagle mount that you can fly through the sky with. This could mean From Software intends to experiment with broader environments, enabling larger and more open world experiences where verticality and aerial combat become central in future games. This is possible as we've seen them do this type of experimenting before. Take Rykard in Elden Ring for example. His whole boss gimmick is that the only way you can kill him is with a weapon in the boss arena. He's a great boss, but a familiar design, as we've seen this with Yhorm in Dark Souls 3, or even further back with the Storm King from Demon's Souls. My point here is that From Software has a pattern of experimenting a mechanic or design in one game and then refining it in their next biggest project. What could this mean though for flying mounts? Imagine flying through places like Archdragon Peak or the Dragon Eyrie from Dark Souls 2 in future games. Or instead of, waiting for a dragon, to land, you can fight it mid-air like you'd have to do for, most of these games. You have to wait for the dragon boss to land and then you could fight it. But with these flying mounts, what happens if you could fight it mid-air? That'd be a lot cooler experience. Additionally, we saw things like, deflects and wall riding as we saw things like wall climbing and deflects present in the trailer. Imagine, scaling a mountain with just your character, and you have to deflect arrows to make progress up the mountain. Yes! However, adding deflects into Elden Ring's gameplay could prove to make a faster and more fair experience when it comes to fighting the insanely fast bosses From Software has been putting out. Fights as we see in Sekiro like Ishin, who are insanely faster than any Dark Souls 1, 2, and even 3 boss fight, but was not nearly complained as much than promised consort Radahn was on release. Why is that? Because in Sekiro, your speed and attack windows on Ishin are fair, while bosses like consort feel like a dodge for your life, wait every 30 minutes to attack. And this comes from a guy who killed Radahn pre-nerf and believes Radahn should have not even been nerfed in the first place. But I could realize that if a large percent of the fan base is complaining about a boss, there might be something justified in their complaints. Now yes, there are many casuals who've just played only Elden Ring and have not even touched, any games from the Dark Souls series or even Bloodborne, and they're just not used to, how difficult these bosses can get. However, their complaints about Radahn being very fast and having no room to attack are felt for me in Millennia. Now, Millennia is a fun fight, a pretty damn good fight, something I can tell my kids and they might be proud of me for accomplishing. But every time I fight Millennia, I'm always on edge because at any moment, she can just pop out this bullshit on me. This move and a couple others like it make her fight more annoying and unfair, as it feels like the mobility and attack mechanics in Elden Ring have not evolved for the player compared to the new bosses, making it an unfair experience. But imagine if you could deflect these attacks, if you could deflect a waterfowl and get a huge attack window after successfully deflecting it, or this move she does as well. This could make the fight more fair, but just as difficult, as instead of, the precise timing to roll, you actually have to use that same precise timing, but to deflect, and you can actually get a satisfying and fair attack window after you're done deflecting it. And clearly with Miyazaki wanting his fights to be more faster and more dynamic, as Promised Consort's after images move is some of the coolest shit I've seen in these games, but is definitely some of the fastest shit I've seen in these. And yes, there are many items and builds that you can use to destroy these bosses. But I mean, if you have a deflect system that worked perfectly for Sekiro, why not just translate that over to a game like Elden Ring, which could allow for Miyazaki to make more intense fights like Promised Consort and give the players a very challenging but far more fair attack window to get some damage out on the boss and overall create a more fair experience. These fights could benefit greatly from a deflect system being implemented in order to be more on par with the growing speed of future From Software bosses, and by adding deflects into more games than just Sekiro could create an overall more fluid and precise fighting experience. Now I talk about this all because Nightreign will have deflects like we've seen in Sekiro, and I believe that is good, and I believe Nightreign experimenting is good for these games. It shows From Software is innovating and creating a new and fresh formula for these games, which in turn means more unique, creative, and innovative landscapes and bosses to look forward to. If anything else, Nightrein's probably just going to be some, good dumb fun, and we don't have to wait, 8 years for it or 10 years for it, you know what I mean? So, and there's definitely going to be new stuff in it, there's going to be new bosses, right? There's that one, Cerberus motherfucker in the trailer. I've also heard that there's going to be a centaur fight, a one-armed centaur fight, which that sounds pretty cool, and I don't think we've seen anything like that yet. I've also heard there's apparently going to be I could just be, just straight up delivering misinformation here, but there's going to apparently be a Shadow Wizard frog fight. I could just be straight up wrong about that, but I swear I read that. I don't know. I could just be. There's gonna be new bosses. It's gonna be co-op, so you play with your friends. You hunt down, the craziest shit you could find in this. So it should be pretty fun. If anything else, just some nice dumb fun. And according to people who've done way more research than I have, it's not gonna be $60. It's probably gonna be $40 or something like that. So it's not gonna be at that premium price tag of $60 or $70. It's gonna be $40. So if anything else, it's some good, cheap Elden Ring dumb fun. So overall, that's what I'm pretty excited about for it, but there are definitely things in the trailer that I did not like, which let's get into now. Now listen, I don't mind if they reuse small things, right? For instance, the stone gargoyles in Elden Ring that you see in the catacombs a lot, their moveset is the exact same as the Thrall from Dark Souls 3. That's fine. Right, I understand that, right? You want to include a similar enemy into the catacombs. You think it makes sense for that type of aesthetic and setting. I understand that. It saves money, it saves time, and you don't have to animate a whole different thing. I don't need animations, unique animations, for every single thing in my game. But it's when you add, bosses like the Nameless King and the Centipede Demon, two bosses we saw in the Nightreign trailer whose stories ended in Dark Souls 3, so, there's no reason for them to be back in Elden Ring, a game whose universe is completely separate from Dark Souls. At least I think, I don't know, maybe I'm missing a huge lore drop, but for what I know right now, it seems like these stories don't connect, and it's pretty lazy on their part. In all seriousness though, it's just such a letdown when you see a boss that you've already killed in one game come back for no reason. It's just always a letdown, but I'm not gonna sit here and freak the fuck out, because it could always change. They could always realize, people didn't like this, it wasn't the smartest move to do. We're gonna scrap these and get rid of these guys. I would appreciate that. I know some people, you know, they're making jokes and it's like Into the Souls verse. They're pretty funny. I like some of the animations. They're fun jokes. But, you know, again, this is reusing bosses, right? It's always like a cardinal sin to do it in these games. And it doesn't make any sense to do it now. So, like I said, it just blows chunks in the worst way possible. But not as many chunks as making us play as predetermined classes? Which leads me to my next criticism, the predetermined classes.
I do not like this song. Santa Claus is coming to town. Do not come to my town.
Now, I like Sekiro. I like Sekiro a lot. I think it's better than Dark Souls 1. Sekiro had a set protagonist with limited customization compared to previous games, and it worked in the context of that story. Sekiro had a very rigid and focused story centered around Wolf protecting Kuro and inadvertently being the center of the collapse of the Ashina Kingdom. This rigid and focused story is communicated well through cutscenes, lots of characters, and settings. Because of this, having to play as the set character like Wolf worked and was even justified. But in Nightreign, it's all about surviving 3 days and killing the Night Lord at the end. Wouldn't it make more sense to give players the free reign to have a character start from ground zero and make a build rather than give them a build and then ask them to just get stronger and survive? I believe giving players no real build to start with and asking them to create a strong build throughout the 3 nights adds another layer to the survival aspect in Nightreign. Additionally, with predetermined classes, you lose the fun of experimenting with different builds. There are an infinite amount of creative builds that comes from giving players the ability to allocate their own levels to whatever stat they see fit, which makes every player's fight with a boss or an area a unique individual experience, as predetermined classes holds players to only using a single style of weapon for that single run, instead of being able to use various styles of weapons and spells for the same single run. This hurts replayability as you play the game with the same exact character, in Nightreign's case the same 8 exact characters every single time, instead of a hybrid of different stats and spells you can make in one character every time you boot up your game. Yes, this criticism can especially really kind of be boiled down to personal preference, but it's hard to ignore how these predetermined characters limits the fun of experimenting with different playstyles. And when you're in a giant world like Elden Ring, it's almost inviting the players to have all the free reign to experiment with different spells, weapons, and armor that your character finds in the lands between. And if you like predetermined characters, that's fine, as I know for some players it can be overwhelming to deal with so many stats that you don't know could affect the player, and you know whatever which way, and then at the end of your playthrough you just have an abomination of just awful stats and just a crap character.
Step back, I think I'm gonna vomit!
Now, this issue of having predetermined characters in these games is personal to me, as can't you tell?
I need my 99 strength milk.
Ultimately, I think Nightreign is a smart move. Nightreign in the grand scheme of things is an experiment. It's a smart move because it allows for From Software to test out a bunch of different things, learn a lot from player feedback, without having to make a whole new game, as well as make a healthy profit as they make a spin-off game of, you know, their largest IP to date. But even from a player perspective, this is still a smart and respectable move. Elden Ring's biggest problem is the co-op experience. Nightreign testing ways they can implement seamless co-op into their future games is good. A Sekiro deflect fighting style combined with Elden Ring's blocking and rolling could prove to reach greater boss experience heights like we haven't seen before, especially with just how fast and insane these bosses have been getting. Nightreign experimenting with different mounts is good, as this could prove to create more unique geographical settings, area, and boss designs, with the aforementioned example of, you know, fighting a dragon midair. Experimenting with faster mobility is good, as this could lead to way more creative boss weapons and a way more engaging and unique PvP in future installments. Overall, it's important to remember Nightreign is not one of their large projects, as it's releasing in 2025, and Shadow of the Erdtree just released, and I couldn't wrap my head around that. How they're fucking working their dev team, but you get my point. This might make some of my criticisms seem small or minute, as they might never repeat mechanics such as the 3 Nights or the Blue Flame Fortnite Storm again. But it's important to remember this is still a standalone game, and as such should be criticized as a full-fledged game, even though it's one of their smaller projects and not at that $60 price tag, which are factors I consider when criticizing this game. Personally, I was pretty hesitant about Nightreign when I saw Nameless King in the trailer and heard about the blue Fortnite flame Fortnite storm. None of it was really sitting well with me. But when I took a step back and realized this is them, laying groundwork for future ideas, for future games, it has me seriously impressed and excited to see where From Software's future lies.